Welcome to English Easy Hub. Join us as we ignite the flames of your English learning journey together.
Please subscribe to watch and embark on your English learning journey. Don't miss out on the exciting content. In this engaging conversation, Jack and his father dive into the complexities of traffic congestion across various U.S. cities. They explore how factors such as geography, urban planning, and cultural reliance on cars contribute to the notorious traffic in places like Los Angeles, New York, Chicago, and Houston. As they discuss the role of public transportation, car culture, and new urban strategies like congestion pricing and sustainable transportation alternatives, they unravel the deeper layers behind why some cities face greater challenges in managing traffic. This conversation also touches on the potential future of urban mobility, examining how technology and societal shifts may influence city planning and transportation.
Dad, I've been wondering, which city in the U.S. has the worst traffic congestion? I hear LA mentioned a lot, but I'm curious what makes some cities worse than others when it comes to traffic.
That's a great question, Jack. LA does come to mind, mostly because it's such a sprawling city. The heavy reliance on cars, along with the geography and layout, makes it difficult to navigate without hitting traffic. But it's more than just the size. It's how the city is structured.
You mean how spread out everything is, right? I know people in LA commute from one end of the city to the other, sometimes for hours. But is it only the distance, or are there other reasons?
It's a combination. Distance is a big factor, but LA also has a limited public transportation system compared to its size. In a city that big, you'd expect a subway system as efficient as New York's, but they haven't developed it enough. So with millions of people relying on cars, the highways get jammed, especially during rush hours. And don't forget the culture. People in LA are used to driving everywhere. It's part of their lifestyle.
That's true. The car culture in LA is like a stereotype at this point. But I'm wondering, why don't they invest more in public transit? Wouldn't that help?
It would, but it's not so simple. Expanding public transportation in a city like LA is costly and time-consuming. There are political, economic, and even geographic challenges. For example, the city is built on fault lines, so tunneling for subways isn't as straightforward as it might be in other places. And then, there's also resistance from people who are so accustomed to driving that they don't see the benefit of public transport.
Interesting, so even geography plays a role in how cities manage traffic. I hadn't thought about that. But what about cities like New York? It's dense, has a well-established public transit system, but people still complain about the traffic there. Why is that?
New York is dense, yes, but that density creates its own set of problems. Even with the subway, there are a lot of people who rely on cars. Think about taxis, delivery trucks, and ride-sharing services. Manhattan, in particular, is an island, so there's limited space for roads, and the streets can get very congested with all the commercial vehicles, pedestrians, and cyclists. Plus, New York is a major global city, attracting millions of tourists every year, which only adds to the pressure.
So, even though it's a compact city with good transit options, the sheer volume of people and vehicles causes congestion. That's fascinating. What about places like Chicago? I've heard that their traffic can be pretty bad, but it doesn't seem to get the same attention as LA or New York.
Chicago's traffic is a bit under the radar, but it's significant. One reason is its harsh winters. Snow and ice can slow down traffic dramatically. Chicago is also a hub for the Midwest, meaning a lot of people are commuting in from the suburbs. The L train system helps, but like in LA, there's still a strong car culture, and the city's highways can't handle the volume during peak hours. You also have to consider Chicago's layout. Lake Michigan limits expansion to the east, So the city has to grow westward, which spreads things out.
That's a good point. I didn't think about how weather could impact traffic. It must be a nightmare driving through a snowstorm during rush hour. Are there cities in the US that actually handle traffic well? Like, do any of them have a solution to this problem?
Some cities are better at managing congestion than others, though it's far from perfect. For example, San Francisco has introduced measures like congestion pricing, where they charge drivers to enter certain parts of the city during peak hours. It helps reduce the number of cars on the road by encouraging public transit use. But even San Francisco has challenges. Its narrow streets and steep hills limit how much they can do to alleviate traffic.
Congestion pricing, didn't London do something like that? I think I've heard that it worked pretty well there.
Yes, London is a good case study. Since introducing congestion charges, traffic in central London has decreased significantly. It's become more efficient for public transit and even cyclists. But the key is that the city has a robust public transportation system, with the tube and buses providing viable alternatives. In the US, we haven't reached that level of integration in many cities.
I guess that makes sense. You can't just charge people for driving without giving them a good alternative. But what about a city like Houston? I've heard they have some pretty serious traffic issues as well.
Houston's a bit like LA in that it's a car-dominated city. It's spread out, and people rely heavily on highways. But there's another issue that Houston faces: induced demand. When the city builds more highways to try and alleviate traffic, it often has the opposite effect. The more road space they create, the more people drive, which leads to even more congestion. It's a bit of a paradox.
Induced demand, that's such an interesting concept. So instead of solving the problem, building more roads actually makes it worse. It's almost counterintuitive. Is there any way to avoid that?
The best way to avoid induced demand is to focus on reducing car dependence altogether. Cities need to invest in alternatives like public transportation, cycling infrastructure, and even encouraging walking. Some cities are also experimenting with the idea of reclaiming road space for pedestrians and public transport. For example, in New York, they've converted parts of Times Square into pedestrian-only areas, and it's worked well to reduce traffic and improve the quality of the space.
That's really cool. I think I read that Paris is doing something similar, trying to reduce car use and make the city more walkable. Do you think that's the future for American cities, too? Less emphasis on cars?
It could be, but it'll take time. Cities like Portland and Seattle are already making progress, focusing more on bike lanes, public transport, and making their downtown areas more pedestrian-friendly. But American cities have historically been built around cars, especially in the post-World War II era. Changing that mindset requires a cultural shift. We're seeing it slowly, but there's still a long way to go.
Yeah, it seems like the US has a car-centric identity. But it's interesting that some cities are moving away from that. I guess younger generations are more open to using public transit or biking.
Absolutely. There's been a growing interest in sustainable living, and younger people are more willing to embrace alternatives to driving. In fact, car ownership among millennials and Gen Z is lower than in previous generations. That could have a major impact on how cities evolve in the next few decades.
That's really exciting. I can imagine a future where cities are designed for people, not just cars. It would make urban living a lot more pleasant. I wonder how technology will play into all of this, like self-driving cars or even things like Uber and Lyft.
Technology is definitely going to play a big role. Self-driving cars could reduce accidents and potentially make traffic more efficient if they're widely adopted. Ride-sharing services like Uber and Lyft are already changing the way people move around cities, though they've also contributed to some congestion by adding more vehicles to the roads. The key will be balancing technology with infrastructure changes. Ideally, we'll see a shift towards fewer individual car trips and more shared, efficient modes of transportation.
It's amazing how many factors come into play when you think about traffic. Geography, culture, infrastructure, even technology, all of it is connected. I never realized how complex it was.
It is complex, but that's what makes urban planning so interesting. Every city has its own unique set of challenges and opportunities. Traffic might seem like a simple issue, but it's really a reflection of much deeper social, economic, and environmental factors. The more we understand it, the better we can design cities that work for everyone.
Wow, I feel like I just took an urban planning course. Thanks for the insight, Dad. It's always great talking to you about these things.
I'm glad you enjoyed it, Jack. These are important conversations to have, especially as we think about the future of our cities. Who knows? Maybe you'll be the one designing them one day.
At the heart of the conversation is the realization that traffic congestion is not a simple issue but rather a multifaceted challenge influenced by urban design, economic factors, cultural habits, and evolving technologies. Through thoughtful dialogue, Jack and his father highlight the importance of innovative approaches to reduce car dependency, such as improving public transit, promoting sustainable alternatives, and embracing new technologies like self-driving cars. Their discussion underscores the value of urban planning that prioritizes people over cars, and how future generations may reshape cities to be more efficient, sustainable, and enjoyable to live in. The conversation serves as a reminder that traffic issues are not just an inconvenience, but a reflection of broader societal patterns that need to be addressed through thoughtful, long-term solutions.
Thanks for watching. Remember to subscribe, like, comment, and share to keep the English learning journey alive.